Welcome to the Lion's Share podcast, where we break down today's most impactful research and bring fresh insights from the academic frontier straight to you.
Look, if you're involved in corporate innovation or maybe high-stakes entrepreneurship, you definitely know the pressure. It's immense. You're not just trying to get, a little bit better each year. It feels more like you're fighting for survival, especially now in this era defined by these really complex, interconnected challenges.
Oh, absolutely. The urgency it's paramount. We're really past the point where just looking for small, incremental improvements is enough. Companies need genuine breakthroughs, and while that requires reliable ways to generate innovative ideas, you can't just sit around waiting for inspiration to strike.
Exactly. And that's what our stack of sources is about today. It's kind of a blueprint for generating those breakthroughs. We're drawing from classic design thinking rules, the IDEO stuff, but also some pretty radical structured methods like the question burst. And we're even looking at high-stakes startup strategy from places like Y Combinator.
Right. The goal really is to give you, the listener, an operational and strategic roadmap for actually generating those breakthrough ideas.
And I think we have to start by acknowledging the core problem here. Innovation demands new ways of thinking.
Because our current assumptions, the ones we don't even examine, they're often the biggest roadblocks. We just take it for granted that the way we do things now, like, say, delivering pizzas only by car, is the only way. But questioning that basic premise, that's what opens up entirely new curves of opportunity. We really have to scrutinize how we scrutinize things. So to really frame this whole innovation hunt properly, we need to nail down maybe 3 core concepts first. The first one comes from Guy Kawasaki, and it's called jumping curves.
Jumping curves, okay.
Yeah. Innovation isn't about making your current product, say, 10% better. That's just iteration, right? Incremental stuff. Jumping curves means making a major technological or conceptual breakthrough, something that basically makes the old way, the old curve, obsolete.
Right. The classic example is the ice business, isn't it? You had the first curve, which was literally ice harvesting, cutting blocks from frozen lakes. Then came the second curve, the ice factory, making ice centrally in the city. Better, but still the same core idea. And then the huge leap, the refrigerator, a completely different curve.
Precisely. And think about it. The companies that dominated ice harvesting, they defined themselves by what they did harvesting ice, not the benefit they provided, which was refrigeration. They couldn't make that jump. They didn't survive.
So the strategic takeaway for our listeners is, are you just focused on optimizing the way things are now, or are you actively searching for that next totally new curve?
That's the fundamental question.
Okay, so if we commit to looking for that next curve, where do we actually start looking? The sources bring up 2 really critical concepts for the idea search itself. The first one is founder market fit. This is a big one from Y Combinator. That's the top startup accelerator we'll be talking about.
That's right. And the idea here is, when you're searching for an idea, it's not just about finding a good idea in some abstract sense. It's about finding a good idea for your specific team. Are you the right people? Do you have the domain expertise or maybe the personal passion or some kind of unfair advantage to tackle this specific problem?
So it's personal. If your team lacks that fit, even a brilliant idea might just fizzle out.
It likely will, yeah. Fit matters enormously.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second big idea for the search.
That's Stephen Johnson's concept of the slow hunch.
Slow hunch. I like the sound of that.
Me too. It pushes back against the popular myth of the sudden eureka moment. Johnson argues that breakthrough ideas, they rarely arrive in a flash of genius. Instead, they often mature slowly, sometimes over years. They need time to sort of collide with other incomplete hunches, other partial observations floating around.
So innovation isn't solitary genius. It's more about connected minds.
Exactly. The environment really favors the connected mind. If you genuinely want innovation, you need to consciously create spaces, whether they're physical, digital, or even just protected time, where these partial ideas can mingle, be seen by others, cross-pollinate, and evolve.
It's a really powerful argument against demanding, immediate, perfect brilliance from your teams.
Absolutely. It takes time and connection.
Okay, this seems to tie back nicely to Guy Kawasaki's core philosophy you mentioned earlier. He says you have to start by aiming to make meaning, not just make money.
Right. Think about the big ones. Apple wanted to democratize computing. Google aimed to democratize information. The meaning came first.
But if you are trying to make meaning, how do you communicate that? Especially that internal revolutionary goal. I mean, a long, boring mission statement probably doesn't capture that fire, does it?
It really doesn't. It just sits in a drawer.
Yeah.
Kawasaki argues that instead of that, 50-word internal document nobody reads, you need a mantra.
A mantra.
Yeah. Something really short, memorable, actionable. Something that defines why you exist, what you stand for at its core.
Like FedEx's mantra, peace of mind, that's powerful. Or Nike's, authentic athletic performance, just a few words.
Exactly. It defines your existence concisely.
So is a challenge then when you're innovating, maybe looking at new ideas, to make sure that new idea actually aligns with or maybe even elevates that core mantra?
Absolutely. The new idea has to serve the meaning. It can't just be about boosting the next quarter's results. It needs to fit the soul of the organization, if you like.
Okay, so let's say the mindset is right. The team understands the need to jump curves and make meaning. How do we actually handle the practicalities, like getting people in a room to generate ideas? Because let's be honest, traditional group brainstorming sessions, they often seem to fall flat. Even when people try to follow the classic rules, from design firms like IDEO or strategists like Ed Muzio.
Yeah, it's a common frustration. IDEO's 7 rules are kind of the gold standard for these group sessions, right? They're designed to maximize the number of ideas and minimize fear. Crucially, they tell you, go for quantity like. Aim for 100 ideas in 60 minutes. And the most important rule, the one everyone knows, defer judgment.
Right, that's key. It absolutely has to be a judgment-free zone.
No criticism allowed. And also things like build on the ideas of others using and instead of but to keep the momentum going. Encourage wild ideas too.
And Ed Muzio adds to this, doesn't he? He emphasizes, do capture absolutely everything, even the seemingly crazy ideas, because they might spark the next idea in someone else.
That's right. And don't evaluate too early. And definitely don't allow those judging questions like, how on earth could you think that would possibly work? Clarifying questions are okay. Judging questions are, well, toxic.
Okay, those rules sound sensible. So why the critique? Why do these sessions often fail?
Well, here's the major critique that comes through in our sources. Studies actually show why these brainstorms often fail to produce genuinely novel stuff. It's often not the rules themselves. It's the destructive group dynamics that take over. Things like social loafing.
Where people just kind of coast, let others do the work.
Exactly. And maybe even more damaging. Social anxiety. The fear of looking stupid, of having your idea shot down or ridiculed in front of colleagues.
That's a pretty big claim. So if we're talking about IEO's rules, the gold standard, are you suggesting those rules just fundamentally don't work? Or is it more that they're just not enough to overcome basic human nature, that sort of inherent need to conform in a group?
I think it's the latter. They're often insufficient to counteract our ingrained social wiring, especially in a verbal, public free-for-all setting. That's why some research actually shows that individuals working alone sometimes perform better, generate more unique ideas than groups do in these traditional brainstorms.
Wow. So the structure matters more than just the rules of engagement.
Structure seems key. You need a structure that forces independent thought before you bring everyone together to converge.
Which leads us, I guess, directly to the structural alternative mentioned, Google Ventures' 5-day sprint process.
Exactly. Look at how they handle solution generation, typically on the Tuesday of the sprint week. They consciously skip the loud, shout out your ideas group brainstorm entirely.
So what do they do instead?
They mandate that participants work alone first, to sketch detailed competing solutions, silently, independently.
Ah, interesting. So everyone develops their idea fully before presenting it.
Right. That structural choice forces deeper independent thinking. It helps counteract groupthink. Crucially, it makes sure the ideas from maybe quieter, more introverted experts get heard just as clearly as those from the loudest voices in the room.
So it's about individual creation before group discussion and critique. That's a critical difference.
It really is. Structure over free form in this case.
Okay, that focus on structure and making space for independent thought really sets us up perfectly for what might be the most radical innovation strategy in our sources today, Hal Gregerson's question burst methodology.
Yes, this one's fascinating. The core idea is incredibly simple, yet powerful. Stop brainstorming for answers and start brainstorming for questions.
Stop looking for answers, start looking for questions. That feels counterintuitive.
It does, right? Because we're so conditioned from school onwards to have the right answer. But innovation often requires challenging the premise, questioning the question itself. The question burst is a really potent tool, especially for, say, corporate entrepreneurship. It's designed specifically to unlock breakthrough insights by forcing us to challenge those deep-seated, often invisible assumptions.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's walk through the steps. This sounds like something managers could use like right now. Step one, set the stage.
Right. First, you select a really thorny challenge, something that matters, maybe something that even makes your heart beat fast, as Gregerson puts it. Then, and this is crucial, you invite 2 or 3 people who ideally have no direct experience with the problem, outsiders, people with a different worldview who can ask those uncomfortable third-rail questions.
Outsiders, okay. And there's a strict rule for the session.
An ironclad rule.
Yeah.
Only questions are allowed. No preambles, no justifications, no sneaking in answers or solutions. Just questions.
Why is that rule so important?
Because the moment you start debating answers, you slip back into your old ways of thinking, the ones that weren't working. The entire goal here is to open up the problem space, not to solve it immediately.
Got it. So, step 2, brainstorm the questions.
Yep. You set a timer for just 4 minutes. It's intentionally short and intense. The goal is to generate at least 15 questions in that time, and you emphasize keeping the questions open-ended, short, and simple. That time pressure helps prevent people from defaulting to their usual, often unsatisfying go-to answers.
So instead of a typical whiteboard session where we're all shouting out ideas for like how to streamline the supply chain,
Right.
we'd all be silently writing down questions like, do we even need a supply chain for this? Or what customer problems are we totally ignoring because we assume the solution is too difficult?
Exactly like that. You're surfacing the underlying assumptions through questions. And then comes step 3. Identify a quest and commit to it. After the 4 minutes, you gather all the questions and study them.
And this actually yields results.
Apparently, yes. The sources suggest that about 80% of question burst sessions produce at least one really useful reframing of the original problem. Once you find a compelling question, or maybe a cluster of related questions, you use the 5 whys technique to dig deeper. Why does this question matter so much? What's the real obstacle it points to?
This idea of reframing seems incredibly relevant for managers. The example given is Odessa, right? A financial services manager.
That's a great illustration. She started out thinking she had a complex communications challenge, basically, how to roll out a new strategy effectively, standard marketing campaign thinking.
Okay.
But after doing a question burst, the questions generated led her to reframe the issue completely. She realized it wasn't really a communications problem at all. It was actually a leadership challenge. Specifically, it boiled down to a lack of trust. Her team wasn't trusting the field managers enough to let them tailor the message for their local markets.
Wow. So the problem itself didn't change, but how she defined it totally shifted.
Exactly. And that change in definition points towards a completely different set of solutions. She moved away from planning a new marketing campaign and started working on restructuring organizational trust and delegation.
That's powerful. It reminds me of the historical example mentioned too about Martin Seligman and psychology.
Right, the birth of positive psychology. It started when Seligman asked a fundamentally different, better question. Instead of just asking what causes mental illness or how do we fix what's broken, he asked, essentially, what if well-being is driven by the presence of positive conditions, not just the absence of negative ones?
A better question literally created a whole new field of study.
It created a better reality to investigate. That's the power of questioning assumptions.
Okay, so if asking the right plurin is maybe the key for established companies doing entrepreneurship, how does this look in the startup world? There, the question often seems to be less about reframing an existing problem and more about finding one worth dedicating your life to. Richard St. John's advice, have a problem, listen. Look around seems to connect directly to that central directive from Y Combinator. Fall in love with the problem.
Absolutely. But crucially, YC also warns founders that falling in love with the wrong problem is a super common and often fatal failure point. They highlight 2 critical mistakes to avoid.
Okay, what are they?
The first one they call CISP, which stands for Solution in Search of a Problem.
Ah, I've seen this. This is when founders get really excited about a cool piece of technology, maybe a new AI model or blockchain or whatever's hot.
Exactly. They start with the tech, and then they go looking for some kind of problem to apply it to. Often, it ends up being a superficial problem that nobody really cares deeply about.
Right. If the end user doesn't care enough about the problem to actually pay for a solution or change their behavior, then it doesn't matter how clever the tech is. It's just tech vanity, not market need.
Precisely. It's useless from a business perspective. The second big mistake YC flags is falling into tar pit ideas.
Tar pit ideas. Okay, what are those?
These are problems that seem really common and superficially plausible targets for a startup, but they turn out to be structurally incredibly hard to solve. They look easy from the outside, but they suck you in like a tar pit.
Oh, that rings so true. I think probably everyone listening has maybe wasted, 6 months chasing a tar pit idea at some point, one that just felt right on the surface. What's the classic example YC uses? Is it the app to meet up with friends?
That's the one they often cite. Seems simple, right? Everyone has that problem sometimes. But there are deep structural reasons. Things like network effects, getting critical mass, overcoming people's existing habits that make it incredibly difficult to crack.
So the advice is, do your homework. Google it. Talk to other founders who've tried and failed to understand why it's so hard before you commit and get stuck.
Exactly. Understand the structural difficulty first. But here's where it gets really interesting and counterintuitive. YC argues that some of the best startup ideas actually share 3 qualities that make them seem bad initially.
Seem bad. How is that an advantage?
Because these qualities scare off less committed competitors. It creates a barrier to entry. This is really critical for entrepreneurial strategy. They call it overcoming schlep blindness.
Schlep blindness. Okay, so what's the first quality of these good-bad ideas?
Number 1, the idea is hard to get started. It involves a lot of schlep, meaning unpleasant, difficult, grunt work up front.
Like Stripe. Integrating online payments was a known pain point for developers, but the actual schlep involved negotiating complex deals with banks, understanding arcane financial infrastructure.
It was so daunting, it scared off tons of potential competitors, leaving this massive greenfield opportunity for Stripe who were willing to do the hard work.
Okay, makes sense. What's number 2?
Number 2, the idea is in a boring space. Think payroll software like Gusto or enterprise compliance tools.
Right. Not exactly glamorous.
Not at all. But these boring B2B spaces often have a much higher success rate than, say, flashy consumer apps. Why? Because most founders avoid boring, complex problems. That means less competition and often clearer paths to revenue for those willing to tackle them.
So boring can be beautiful and profitable. Okay, and the third quality?
Number 3, and this is maybe the most counterintuitive, the idea has existing competitors, lots of them even.
Wait, isn't competition bad?
You'd think so. But YC argues that if there are already, say, 20 competitors trying to solve a problem, it's actually a strong signal that there's huge, validated customer demand for a solution. Think about Dropbox. When they launched, they were like the 20th cloud storage company.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. But the very fact that the first 19 hadn't totally succeeded and captured the market signaled that the problem was big, important, and hadn't been solved perfectly yet. It showed there was a massive opportunity for someone with a better insight or execution to dominate.
That completely reframes how you might look at a crowded market. It's not necessarily a deterrent. It could be an indicator of opportunity.
It absolutely could be. So once you've maybe navigated these treacherous waters and landed on a high-potential idea, maybe one that seemed bad but is actually good, you still need to evaluate its potential rigorously. And that's where Kawasaki's checklist comes back in handy. You need to roll the dice.
Dicey. Okay, remind me what that stands for.
The innovation, the idea, it needs to be deep. That means real functional depth, not just surface level. Kawasaki used the example of the reef sandal that secretly have a bottle opener built into the sole. That's depth.
Okay, deep. What's next?
Intelligent. Does it make the user feel smarter? Like Ford's MyKey system that lets parents program speed limits for their teen drivers. That's intelligent design.
Deep, intelligent.
Then complete.
Complete, meaning it addresses the whole problem, not just a piece of it. And then empowering, does it enable users to do things they couldn't do before? And finally, elegant, is the design and user experience seamless and pleasing?
Deep, intelligent, complete, empowering, and elegant. That's a pretty solid checklist to apply to any new venture or product idea.
It really grounds the evaluation in customer value and experience. Hashtags, tag, wrap up, and key takeaways.
So as we bring all these threads together, synthesizing this really rich material, it feels like the big takeaways is this. If organizations truly want to foster innovation, they have to shift their approach. They need to move away from passively waiting for that lone genius with the sudden stroke of inspiration, which rarely happens anyway.
Right, and instead they need to actively design environments. Environments where those slow hunches can collide and connect, and environments where those deeply held assumptions can be surfaced and challenged using things like the question burst.
Absolutely, and that kind of organizational culture, that tone, it really has to be set from the very top. It requires active leadership. Look at innovators like Jeff Bezos and Amazon. He famously focused on lowering the cost of experimentation so that thousands, not just hundreds, of new ideas could be tested cheaply and quickly.
Enabling more shots on goal, basically?
Exactly. Or Mark Benioff at Salesforce. Our sources mention figures suggesting he spends a significant amount of his time, maybe around 4 months a year, personally involved in innovation, acting as a networker, connecting ideas and people. This isn't passive management. It's deep, active, strategic commitment from the leader.
And that individual commitment from the top really sets the standard for the entire organization. It signals that this stuff matters. And finally, I guess all the great ideas and probing questions in the world are kind of insufficient if there's no follow-up, right?
Totally insufficient. Leaders have to consciously carve out time, not just to generate questions or ideas, but to actually gather and analyze the new information that comes from them. There needs to be accountability. Accountability ensures that the potential future you just glimpsed by questioning the present actually has a chance to materialize.
So we've covered a lot. We've explored the classic rules of engagement for brainstorming. We've seen the power of reframing problems through questioning. And we've looked at the strategic hunt for those high-potential entrepreneurial opportunities.
And a recurring theme has been how genuine questioning often gets subverted in organizations, which tend to prefer consensus and known answers over uncomfortable inquiry.
Yeah, which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. It comes from the healthcare technology innovator Robert Langer, often called the Edison of medicine. He pointed out that in school, you're typically judged by how well you answer the questions you're given.
Get the right answer.
But in life, and especially in innovation and entrepreneurship, you are ultimately judged by how good your questions are. So the challenge we leave you with this week is this. What one deeply held assumption in your work, in your team, in your organization will you consciously question this week? An assumption that, if challenged, might just open up a completely new pathway to change.
Thanks for tuning into the Lion's Share podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, share it with a friend and join us next time for more ideas worth talking about. We'll see you next time.